So growing up, I learned that there are only two genders. Now, I know there's a lot of controversy, including with Aiden Ross tweeting out that there are only two genders. But me personally, growing up in middle school, they taught me that there are only two genders, male and female, X and Y. And today's story is basically where things got really intense with my teacher and some other girl in my class who thought she was right. So let's get straight into this insane story. Yo, what is going on, you guys? My name's Bubba, and welcome back to another insane video. So today's story starts off back when I was in middle school. This was my grade 6 year, and I remember basically my teacher ended up walking in front of the class, explaining to all of us that there's going to be a new unit we have to learn for school. Now, me, honestly, I don't really know much about it. I look at it and just think, oh, great, more homework. But then I remember there was a girl with like blue hair that was, I'm not gonna lie, majorly, and I mean majorly obese, comes into the classroom and says, "Hello class, my name is Lizzie, and today I'm going to be teaching you all the different genders." Wait, what is what I said? And then I remember there was a kid that usually was really smart in my class and would always answer every question. He ended up putting up his hand and saying, "Oh, I know this one. There's only two." I remember when he said that out loud with his hand up in the air, acting like he was giving the right answer. I remember the teacher looked over at the student and said, "You are wrong. You are absolutely the dumbest kid in the class." At that point, I remember the whole class started getting confused. They had no idea what in the world this teacher was talking about. But then she started talking about a bunch of other different genders. Like, for example, for some reason, the word two-spirit is a gender. I'm not gonna lie. When I first heard about it, I thought it was some Pokemon or a new special ability you would get in Skyrim. But no, she ended up explaining that two-spirit was like this whole like feeling both things. I don't know. But one thing I realized, the more she explained about the different genders, everything determined on how you're feeling. It's not based on what's between your legs. It's not based on what hormones you have or what chromosomes you have, because apparently you can change it all with just one pill. But basically what she was explaining is that whatever you feel like is what your gender is. I remember me learning this. I thought that was pretty interesting. So I started basically going back home that day, basically questioning myself, thinking, wait, so am I like supposed to be a boy? Reminder, I was in grade 6, so I was way too young to understand anything. Meaning that the only things in my life that I really cared about was my middle school crush, which was a girl at the time, and always has been a girl because I never changed my preference, I guess. I don't know. And basically Call of Duty. But going on, I remember I went up to my parents and I asked them the same question. I said, "Mom, Dad, am I supposed to be a boy?" I remember my parents looked at me and my dad looks at me and says, "What do you mean? What's between your legs?" And I told them, I had a giant eggplant. And then right after that, my mom says to me, "That means you are a boy." Then I started getting confused. I remember I ended up telling them that my teacher told me that basically your gender is based on how you're feeling and what you feel like you are, basically. Now, one thing I have to mention is that I'm Christian and my family's Christian and my dad believes in the Bible and so do I. And basically, I remember my dad ended up opening the Bible and showing me it saying, "See, look, it says here there are only two genders, man and woman. God made only man and woman. There is no two-spirit, there is no pan-gender, whatever you want to be gender." And it kind of just made sense to me. I don't know. Growing up in a Christian household, you kind of just learn these things, I guess, or spiritual terms. And bringing up two-spirit did not help at all. But basically, I remember that situation afterwards. I ended up going to school the next day. And if you guys don't know, I remember my mom basically in the morning before I went to school ended up putting a Bible in my backpack saying, "God will take you through this class and not be hurt by Satan." And then my mom ended up praying for me and I ended up going to school. When I went to school, I remember we ended up having the same lady, that big fat obese woman, Lizzie is what we kind of call her for the story, basically ended up going in front of the class and saying, "Okay, I'm going to be assigning some work to you guys. I want you guys to think of how many genders there are from what I taught you yesterday." And the blue-haired obese woman ended up pointing me out and saying, "Yes, Bubba?" "Yeah, so apparently in this book," and I ended up whipping out the Bible once she pointed me out, and I opened it to what my dad showed me and said, "If you look here, it says God only made man and woman. There's no two-spirit." When I brought out the Bible, the look that this teacher had on her face was like she was going to kill me. Like, no joke, she walked up to me, stomping with her rhino toes, and basically said to me, "This is not real." Ended up grabbing my Bible and throwing it out the window. Like, no joke, she actually threw it out the window. I didn't even know the window was open until she ended up throwing the Bible out there. At that point, I remember I stood up and I ran for it. I actually ended up leaving the classroom, ran outside, and basically went to go grab my Bible. And when I did, I remember the teacher, the fat obese woman, ended up basically looking out the window, saw I picked up my Bible again, and said, "You're not allowed back in this classroom until you understand the real genders," and ended up closing the window. And at that point, when I tried walking back into class, me thinking that maybe she was joking or something, or maybe trying to pull a stunt, I was ended up locked out of my classroom. I remember I ended up sitting down outside the door, crisscross applesauce, basically waiting to maybe get an answer or in some way actually get invited back into the classroom. And then I remember our principal was walking down the hallway and she looked at me sitting down. She came up to me and said, Bubba, what did you do? And I told her how basically the teacher ended up throwing my Bible outside and basically told me not to come in until I learned all the genders. And when I told my principal this, she was very upset. Like, no joke, she was so mad to the point where, I'm not gonna lie, the only time I've seen someone that mad was when I brought up to my father about this whole conversation about two genders. And basically, she ended up opening the classroom door with a key, walking me inside with her hand on my shoulder and saying, excuse me, teacher, you're not allowed to kick out students. You do know this, right? And then I remember the fat teacher ended up turning her head at me, looking at me with like her evil stare that she had towards all the children in the classroom, and said to my principal, yeah, no, he's not allowed in my classroom. He literally brought up the Bible in the middle of class. Who do you think he is? And then I remember my principal ended up yelling back at her saying, listen, I don't care how you feel. Throwing this kid's faith out the window is gonna make me kick you out of this school. At that point, I remember the whole class was just staring at what was going on and freaking out, thinking this is like insane. And then I remember afterwards, I ended up looking around and everyone was looking at me as well because I guess caused all this in some way. And I remember I just went to go sit back down, put my Bible back in my backpack, and then basically the teacher ended up escorting the student out of the class. I thought it was over. I thought maybe the argument was over. That's it, you know, move on to better things. The teacher ended up coming back to our classroom, the original teacher that we had, not the big old fat obese woman, because she was just left outside. She came back to the classroom saying, what happened to Lizzie? I ended up putting up my hand and saying that she ended up getting kicked out and all that stuff because she threw my Bible outside. And basically she ended up getting really irritated and actually ended up going down to the principal's office. I remember basically that almost like for like 20 minutes at the end of class, we had no teacher. We were all just sitting down, just chilling and just going on our phones, doing our own thing. We didn't know what to say or do. So me, I remember I ended up just pulling out my iPod, started playing Angry Birds and going on YouTube. But out of nowhere, I remember I saw the fat teacher that originally was teaching us about all these different genders coming to the window that she originally threw out my Bible and was just staring at me. She was staring at me as if she was going to cast lightning through the school to hit me. Like, I didn't know what to think. And at that point, I remember the teacher, the original teacher, ended up walking back in, seeing that Lizzie was outside, the fat obese teacher that no one likes, and basically said, Bubba, look out that window. You caused this. What? I remember at that point, I was so annoyed. I ended up texting my mom with my iPod using iMessage since I had Wi-Fi to the school, telling her what's going on. And at that point, my parents ended up coming to the school, arguing with the teacher that we had and also the other teacher, Lizzie, because they met up outside somehow. And basically one thing led to another. Cops were called because apparently this fat obese woman tried hitting my own father. Yeah, I don't even know what to think. At this point, honestly, I'll tell you this much. There are people that believe in science and there are people that believe in, well, their faith. And there are also people that believe in their feelings. If you believe in your feelings, sure, be whatever you want. Be an attack helicopter if you have to. But at the same time, if you believe in your faith and believe in biology, well, terms are, I think we all know, there's only two genders. But that's basically it for today's story. Make sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. And like I always say, just fall for more embarrassing but crazy stories. Peace out, guys. All right, what is going on, you guys? My name's Bubba, and welcome back to another crazy story. So today's story is about how I became Andrew Tate in my high school. It all starts off back when I was in grade 10. Now, in grade 10, I remember I was a pretty basic kid. To be honest, in grade 10, even though I was doing a lot of the Devil's Tango, I ended up becoming one of those people in my school that was well known for it. And me being well known for pulling a lot of girls is at the same time having a good reputation and at the same time having a bad one. Because usually there'll be those group of girls that would be like, oh my G, like Bubba's like one of those guys who can pull like literally anyone. Like he's so good in bed. And then there's those other girls that are like, OMG, like he literally treats women like objects. Like who does he think he is? And even though I was usually talked about in that way, I'm gonna be brutally honest, you guys, I never really actually full on cared. Because you gotta understand, in high school and even in life in general, people will say many things and people will always say something to put you down. But luckily for me, I have that trait where I don't actually give an absolute Like, seriously, if someone has something bad to say, they can say it, but at the same time, who is really gonna care? And that's what I did. Every time someone told me something bad about me, I would just ignore it, and at the same time, when someone said something good about me, I'll take the compliment and move on. But then comes the most crazy part. I remember a girl walked up to me in my high school one time, and when she walked up to me, she said, "Hey, Bubba, I was just curious. I really want to, like, get advice from you about something." And when she asked me for advice, I'm not gonna lie, I don't like giving advice at all, because I'm gonna be straight up with you guys. Getting advice from someone usually means that you need help getting pointed out the obvious. Like, for example, I need advice on getting up in the morning. Then just get up in the damn morning if you know you want it. I don't know, people like to overthink things and overcomplicate things. But anyways, going on with the story, I remember she asked me for advice, and she asked me for advice on how to get a guy. And I'm not gonna lie, I remember I looked at her straight in the eyes and I told her the goddamn truth. You really don't need advice on getting a guy. You gotta understand that you are legit a woman. You can literally pull and ask guys guys, whenever you want to do the devil's tango. As for guys, we actually have to try. So the fact that you need to ask me, a guy, on how to get a girl is ultimately the most disgusting thing I've ever heard. And I ended up walking away. I remember as I walked away, some other girls ended up hearing what I said when she asked me for advice, and they were really pissed off. I remember one of them walked up to me saying, but what? I can't believe you actually just said that to her. Are you serious? Like, who do you think you are? Some kind of god? What do you mean? Is what I said to her. And then she said, listen, I get it. You pull a bunch of girls and stuff, and like, you think you're all cool with your cool sports car, but you gotta understand, like, you can't just treat women like that. Treat women like that? Is what I said. I'm like, what do you mean? Like, what? I was so confused. And then I remember another girl ended up coming into the conversation, and she said, hey, why are you guys telling Bubba like that? He's actually such a nice guy. Like, he helped me fix my tire when my car was broken. In reality, I'm not gonna lie, she literally parked her car in front of my place and undid her tire. But going on with the story, and like, he's such a nice dude. Why would you do that? And I remember the girl and the other girl just started arguing with each other about if I'm a good guy or not. And I remember it got to the point where some of my friends that were like the homies, the boys, let's just say, came up behind me saying, yo, what's going on here? Why are these girls being weirdos? And then that's when things got weird. I remember I ended up just kind of looking at everyone and just saying, everyone calm down. Honestly, it doesn't matter. Okay, I'm just gonna go. Leave me alone. Quit being weird. And I ended up leaving. I remember when I got to my next class, I ended up sitting down beside a girl that heard the conversation, and I'm not gonna lie, she kept trying to talk to me about, you know, what happened in the hallway. And she got to the point where she told me, hey Bubba, I was wondering, I'm going to this like women's rights march after school, and honestly, I think you can learn a lot from it. Do you want to go? I looked at her and I'm like, what do you mean? What's so different about men and women? Like, what do we not have in common? And then she said, oh, trust me, there's a lot we don't have in common. Do you really want to go to this march? Okay, I guess. So I ended up taking my car and I ended up driving her downtown after school that day, and we ended up going to this women's freedom march. When I went there, I remember I ended up seeing a bunch of women screaming out a bunch of crazy things. A lot of them were saying how girls were better than men and all this stuff that honestly, it just seemed really misogynistic. But at the same time, I didn't really care because I was there to just, you know, overhear them, and giving them a listen was honestly kind of interesting. I remember I started walking up to random women there and just started talking to them, being a nice guy, because, you know, them seeing a nice guy, I guess, is very rare. And I remember I went up to this girl and I said, so like, what are you fighting for? She looked at me and she's like, oh, I'm fighting for women's rights. We should be able to get paid the same as men. I looked at her and I'm like, yeah, you guys should get a job. I agree. I like that. Yes, women should work. I remember I was chanting with her a little bit, and then I got bored and I moved on to the next person. And basically I started talking to her and she's like, OMG, like, guys get to like literally do the devil's tango with literally whoever they want. Girls should too. We are the same. I remember I looked at her and I'm like, hell yeah, you know what? You get to do whatever you want. Go do the devil's tango with whoever you want. Hi, my name's Bubba. And I shook her hand. She found it cute and laughed, and I ended up getting her Snapchat. And then going on after that, I remember I went on to another chick and I started talking to this other girl. Except this girl, she seemed literally crazy. I walked up to her and I'm like, hey, like, so what are you fighting for? She looks at me and she's like, free the nipple. Yeah, let's free the nipple, Bubba. Let's do it together. Huh? Is what I said. Honestly, I can't complain. Girls, like, you know, yeah, you guys should free the nipple. Honestly, I chanted with her. I said, yes, let's go. You know, being a happy guy I was. And I remember after all that commotion and me talking to some people and going around, I remember I went back to the person that originally invited me to this freedom march. I said, honestly, I'm not gonna lie, girl. I don't know why you're saying men and women are so different. I agree with half of the stuff they're saying. I remember this girl looks at me and she's like, really? And I'm like, hell yeah. Honestly, you changed me today. Men and women should be the same. Even though I already believed that, but I just wanted her to go home. So I ended up taking her to my car and we ended up going back home. And the next day at school, I remember word got around that I went to a freedom march. Everyone was talking about it. You know, they're basically saying how it's crazy how I actually went to one. And then one girl in the hallway ended up running up to me saying, Bubba, did you actually go to that women's march? Like, what did you learn? Like, did you learn not to be misogynistic? And then I remember I looked at her and I told her straight up the goddamn truth. I was never misogynistic in the first place. I'm gonna be straight up honest with you. I know in my mind, men and women will never biologically be the same, but mentally, if you want to do what you want to do, go for it. Because literally, for me, I just want to do what I want to do. And if I love doing the devil's tango with a ton of women, then you can do the same and do the devil's tango with a bunch of men. I really don't care, but just don't put over my head if I want to. She looks at me and she's like, OMG, like, you're still treating women like objects though. We don't want that. I looked at her and I said, listen, if a girl looks at me and she's attracted to me and my body, we will do the devil's tango. And there's nothing you're gonna stop it. It's not like I'm forcing anyone to do anything. If she wants it, she gets it. She looks at me and she's like, yeah, but like, you're not supposed to do that. Like, you're supposed to like show us love and care. And I remember I told her something that Andrew Tate said a lot of when I was watching his interviews, and it reminded me of this day so much that it literally made me Andrew Tate. And funny enough, I did take kickboxing literally 2 weeks afterwards. But basically, I remember I told her, listen, I'm not gonna lie, I get it. I do the devil's tango with a lot of girls. But no matter what you say, these girls will always message me. These girls will always want me. And at the end of the day, I'm not gonna lie. If they want to be hoes and be in my pocket, let them. At the end of the day, I'm the top G. I remember this girl looks at me and she's like, what in the world is a top G? Like, what? I looked at her and said, a top G is when you are the alpha male, not alpha female. And I walked away. It was honestly one of the most craziest moments of my life. And I remember I said that to her. And recently I was watching through Andrew Tate's like videos of him like talking about like, you know, misogynistics and stuff. And I'm not gonna lie, as a person who's been with a lot of girls as well as Andrew Tate, I can easily say he's kind of right about some things. It's not in terms of misogyny or anything. It's just, I guess in a way, he reminded me of a lot about myself in high school. Anyways, guys, that is basically it for today's story. Make sure you guys do leave a like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. And like I always say, follow for more embarrassing stories. Peace out, guys. Okay, so it is Pride Month. And one thing I will say is that this video is not meant to hurt anyone or offend anyone in the LGBTQ community. But just to make sure, if your feelings don't get hurt, make sure you guys leave a like and subscribe. That way I know I did not offend any of you guys. But if I did, well, I'm sorry, I guess. Anyways, let's just jump straight into the story. Yo, what is going on, you guys? My name's Bubba, and welcome back to an insane video. So today's story takes place back when I was in grade 10. When I was in grade 10, one thing I will say was that bullying was very common. As much as I know that bullying isn't a good thing, being bullied was just a very common thing throughout my high school. I won't say I got bullied as much, but I will say this much, I did get picked on. But the only reason I got picked on was becoming a YouTuber. So to all the bullies that watch my videos now, get wrecked. I'm a YouTuber. Sorry, that's not the point, but going on. Anyways, I remember back when I was in grade 10, it was Pride Month like it is right now. And basically what ended up happening was that, let's just say the LGBTQ community in our school really had a voice. And by having a voice, I mean, they always had a voice, but let's just say it got to the point where they were pushing it down people's throats. Apparently one thing the LGBTQ was trying to do was make an assembly where basically they would have like, you know, a trans person come in and talk about them coming out. And also they tried to get like drag queens to come into the school. And I know this is a very common issue nowadays. And I just want to say this is really nothing new. Because I remember back when I was in grade 10, they actually managed to somehow get the assembly of them bringing drag queens, furries, and let's just say people in the LGBTQ community to speak up. And when I first heard about this, I thought, oh great, just another assembly that I'm gonna skip. Now, no, I am not in any way homophobic. It's just honestly, one thing I realized growing up was that I grew up in a really strict family home and that I grew up really not understanding the LGBTQ community. Hell, even nowadays, I don't fully understand it. But one thing I will say is that I was going to skip the assembly. And I remember when it was the day of the assembly, I heard a lot of people on the football team deciding to actually start a riot. Now, I have no idea why the football team wanted to riot. It made no sense to me, but at the same time, I guess they just wanted to goof around, which made sense because, you know, it was not uncommon for them to do that. So I remember around lunchtime before the assembly started, because the assembly started right after lunch, I was in the cafeteria eating my sandwich and I was just sitting down doing my own thing. And one thing I realized was that when I was sitting in the cafeteria was that there were some people smoking outside, smoking a Zaza, if you know what I mean. And they were talking about basically how it's super unfair that the LGBTQ community gets to have an assembly, but when it comes to something about like suicide and stuff, they didn't get an assembly. I have no idea, but one thing was for sure, they were very upset about something. So me listening in, I remember I decided to kind of lean towards the window to understand what was going on. And I remember there was one really loud kid that was super upset and super angry about this LGBTQ community that he really wanted to do something to really piss him off. Now, when I heard about this, I thought maybe I should say something, but obviously I was in grade 10. I mostly kept to myself like other high schoolers would. And I realized that it was really not my place to say anything. So going on, I remember the bell rang and basically I got up and started getting ready to go to the classroom to get ready for the assembly. When I started walking to the classroom though, I remember there was one really angry kid that walked right past me and he was the one that was basically talking all the smack about, you know, the LGBTQ. And I remember he bumped into me and said, "Watch it, freak," and kept walking. But one thing I realized about him when I looked at him was that he had a tattoo on his chest. And the tattoo this kid had on his chest was not a normal tattoo that anyone should have. If anyone knows World War II, let's just say having a Nazi logo tattooed on you was not not a good thing, at least in my mind. So going on, I remember I kind of just decided, you know what? I'm not going to do anything. I'm just going to go to my class and do my own thing. And that's what I did. I went to class. I ended up sitting in my chair, and let's just say the teacher instantly walks in wearing an all rainbow outfit saying, okay, class, let's start heading for the assembly. Woo, Pride Month. And I remember everyone looked at her with a blank face as if we did not care. We all stood up, started lining up, and started heading towards the assembly. When we got to the gym, we all ended up sitting in there, sitting on the bleachers, and we all sat down and just basically watched this whole thing go down. They were playing music, you know, throwing flags around and all this stuff. And then this is where the story gets really intense. Because I remember out of nowhere, when we were all sitting down on the bleachers, there were two drag queens walking up on stage and basically holding a giant rainbow flag. Now, if you guys don't know what the rainbow flag stands for, it stands for the LGBTQ. I don't know why the rainbow is the LGBTQ logo, but I guess they have like colors to coordinate, like, you know, what gender's which. Anyways, I remember when the flag came in and they were holding it up and this girl was giving a speech about, you know, coming out and basically being yourself. I remember the kid that was super upset from outside the cafeteria ends up standing up and running and sprinting through the rainbow flag. When he sprinted through, I remember everyone started cheering and everyone started yelling, celebrating, and all the jocks were standing up going, ooh, 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 let's go. But then what this kid did next was not normal, because I remember the drag queen that was, you know, giving a speech ended up walking up to the kid saying, oh, like, are you coming out? Is that what you're doing right now? Oh my goodness, tell us what gender you are. And I remember this kid ended up basically grabbing the microphone saying, I am a male, I am only a male, and all of you guys need to literally go and fix yourselves. Pray the gay away. And he ended up pulling out a lighter and lighting up the rainbow flag and dropping it on the ground. This blew everyone's mind, and I remember everyone started freaking out when the rainbow flag was on fire, literally in the gymnasium. I remember teachers started standing up and everyone started freaking out, and kids actually started running out of the gym and sprinting away. And I want to say me, I didn't know what to do in the moment. So I ended up standing up and just literally running out of the school and running all the way across the street. And when I ran across the street, one thing I realized was that there were a lot of sirens, and I mean a lot of sirens coming down, and it was a lot of firefighters and cops came down, and the kid with the tattoo of a Nazi logo ended up actually getting arrested. Honestly, I'm not surprised because lighting anything in school is illegal, but man, that was the most insane Pride Month of my entire life. I will say this much. I understand that people are not willing to accept change in this world, and I get how, you know, times have changed from back then till now. But one thing I will say is that let's just all respect each other. Like, seriously, if you want to be something, be it. Anyways, guys, that is basically it for today's story. Make sure you guys do leave a like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. And like I always say, just fall for embarrassing stories. Peace out, guys.